Hey gang, welcome back to another video. Now as I get back into the swing of things, I wanted to make a medieval lantern from foam that could be used for Halloween costume, cosplay, LARPing, or just as decoration. Plus you can download my free pattern if you want to make one for yourself. So let's get into it. This whole build starts with a bit of craft foam. I grabbed both 2mm and 5mm versions since they're easy to find at most craft stores. They're light, and they're relatively inexpensive. These will make up the majority of the structure of the lantern. But before I get any further, I'll need a pattern. Now I'd looked at a bunch of medieval style lanterns online and then came up with the following plan, which I've linked in the video description should you want to make one for yourself. The parts are relatively basic. A large cone shape with a few horizontal rings that will be held together with some vertical strips. I'd planned on making some additional details from thinner foam, like a decorative strip on the larger cone and some fake rivets, but in the process of making the lantern, I completely forgot about them. So they're in my plans, just not in the video. With that out of the way, I could get to cutting all of my shapes. I can start with the assembly using a bit of contact cement. Now if you don't have contact cement, you could do this with hot glue. The contact cement gets brushed onto both edges that will be glued together, given about 10 minutes to dry or just long enough that the edges are dry to the touch, and then they can be pressed together for an instant bond. Now because it was right around 100 degrees today, this took just a few minutes before the contact cement was dry, and so I could get right to pressing the surfaces together to start forming the parts of my lantern. For the main cone, I started with the outermost edge, since it's more important to have that look even, and then I can make my way towards the point of the cone, which will be obscured by another piece of foam. The smaller cone is a bit tougher since it doesn't have the hole at the top. But with careful manipulation of the foam, I was able to line up my edges and get them pressed together to create the top to my lantern. If you find that the foam won't bend easily, you can pre-shape it before applying the contact cement, which should help it once it's ready to be joined together. Next, I turned all the horizontal strips into rings, and then I could get to assembling the lantern. Initially, I had planned to do this with hot glue, which is great for filling in seams in these types of projects. But because I went with contact cement, I'd need to sand down an edge on this ring to create more gluing surface between parts. So I grabbed my rotary tool with a sanding drum and added a bevel to one edge. It won't be perfect, but it should give me just enough surface to get a decent bond. Once I had my bevel sanded in, I grabbed a marker to indicate where I needed to apply adhesive, and then I could brush on more contact cement to the cone, as well as the collar, and eventually to the small cone, and then I could press them into position. And just like that, I've got the top to my lantern. Next up is the cage part of the build. I started by gluing the vertical pieces to the bottom horizontal ring and then gluing in the bottom of the lantern. If I were to do this again, I would have done it differently, applying cement to the base of the lantern and then wrapping the strap around it before sealing its ends, since mine ended up being a bit uneven, which makes it sit a little crooked. Thankfully, this is supposed to look like an old handheld lantern, and so this bit of imperfection only adds to its story. The two remaining rings got glued to the vertical strips, one about 4 inches from the bottom and the last ring at the very top, and then I could glue it to the larger cone. But once again, I'd need to bevel the edges to give myself a better gluing surface before applying more contact cement, letting it get tacky, and then pressing it into position. The last part of this assembly is the handle. The edges that make contact with the cone got beveled, and then I applied some contact cement to them and lightly pressed it in place to help highlight where I'd need to apply glue on the cone. Then I could apply contact cement to the cone, let it get tacky, and then press the handle in place. And that's it for construction. Of course, you could add in rivet details with foam or googly eyes or any other details that you'd like. But for me, this is just fine, and I can get to making the foam look like old oxidized metal with the help of some acrylic modeling paste. If you saw my medieval torch video, this technique will be familiar to you. Basically, the paste will get stippled onto the foam to create texture that once painted will make it look like old metal. If you didn't want to use the modeling paste, you could add a bit of baking soda to acrylic paint and apply it using the same technique. You're basically wanting to give it the look of old pitted metal. When I've covered the entire lantern with the modeling paste and given it time to dry, I can get to painting, starting by coating the entire lantern with some matte black spray paint. Black or even dark gray acrylic paint would work just as well. Once the black paint had dried, I grabbed 2 metallic acrylic paints, since one was too bright and the other too dark, and mixed them to arrive at a pewter color, which then got dry brushed over the entire surface of the lantern, making sure to get into all of the recesses. Dry brushing is one of those techniques that's all about feel, so you'll want to start in an inconspicuous place first and work your way around as you get more comfortable. When I'd addressed the entire piece, I went back with a small amount of the lighter metallic paint to hit some of the edges to bring out a bit more of the detail, and then this paint job was done. Now this wouldn't be a lantern without some kind of light source. And there's a lot of different ways you could go about it, but in the interest of time and because I found these cool new LED flame lights and wanted to test them out, I just recycled my PVC pipe and hot glue candle from a previous video, but now it has a cool new light source, and I squeezed that inside of the lantern body to complete this medieval prop.
Now, while you may not need a medieval lantern for any of your projects, hopefully this video acts as a reminder of just how easy it is to work with foam, plus it doesn't require any specialized tools to do it. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go make something.